want to make a few general comments. I mean, one is, in relation to this bill, is the massive time delay that it has taken so long for this bill to wind its way through the House. In that time, Fianna Fáil has put forward a bill in relation to those sports clubs which have a bar, and I'm glad that the Minister has put that into the legislation, and we do welcome that. However, the fact that this legislation has been allowed to rumble on into this year means that many sports clubs now are getting their rates bills now. The rate, and two of them were on my local radio station the other day. They got a huge rates bill, actually for the first time ever, they said. They never had a rates bill before in respect to their bar. The valuation office must have been down. Now, had this legislation been passed expeditiously, speedily, or within the, earlier than the 2.5 years, those clubs probably wouldn't have got a rates bill. And can I ask the Minister to clarify, when does this actually come into effect? And if a club has a rates bill now that it has received in the post, and many clubs have received them, do they have to pay the rates for this year when this bill is passed? Or is it going to take years and years for a revaluation to take place? That's my worry now with this legislation. And secondly, could the Minister clarify the whole area of community sport under the bill? Because, with all due respect, your colleague, Deputy Fitzpatrick, was on my local radio station the other morning, and there was massive confusion engendered by that particular debate as to what is or isn't rateable. It was suggested that all income coming in from renting out pitches, etc., was exempt, would make the premises rateable. Now, my understanding is, through our debates here in the Seanad, that was substantially amended, and if I recall, I welcomed that at the time, that once it wasn't done for profit and once it involved community sport, which in fairness, which is broadly defined. And again, Minister, I have to say this is something that I got you to change, because that provisional income was there originally, and I'm glad that I succeeded in getting that changed, and I'm very proud of that, in fact. But can the Minister clarify, when are these bills going to actually change? And secondly, what is or isn't rateable in a sports club? I think the people, certainly in my region and probably across the country, will be listening to what you have to say, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. Minister, do you wish to respond?
I do indeed, and I too am very proud that in this House, I think we had, in both Houses, but I must say particularly in this House, we had a debate in what was a Seanad-initiated bill, or a bill initiated in the Seanad, that did, I think, make a number of improvements to the valuations system, and indeed to the bill as presented to the House. And I acknowledge the constructive role played by senators, including Senator Byrne, in that process. I think I think the situation we've ended up with for sports clubs is now more clear than perhaps it was at the start of the process. The changes will take effect in terms of the bills from 2016. The further amendments that we made at report stage in the Seanad did clarify that income generated does not include income from visiting teams or income generated from the use of facilities for the ordinary purpose of community sport. What we've tried to do, and we've tried to make it, and I know we debated this, and I think we arrived at a position which we all agreed, and we tried to make it as clear as we possibly could, that it was income generated from purely commercial activity, from largely arising from the bars in many sports clubs, though not exclusively. And I think we've improved that, and I think we've made it as clear as we possibly can in the legislation.
So a local club renting out sports facilities to the local community or communities adjacent to that community won't mean a commercial rate attaching to that premises?
That's absolutely my understanding.
And you're confirming that, Minister?
Yes.
And when you say that this will take effect in 2016, is that the bills? So there'll be no relief in 2015 for clubs, but you're saying there will be, there will now obviously have to be a revaluation this year, because someone's going to have to come out and remeasure these premises, because at the moment the bar is not measured as the whole of the premises. So how long is that going to take, and are you given any commitments in relation to that?
Yeah, we're giving a commitment that will take account, you're right, that body of work will have to be done. We're giving an undertaking that will be done, so that therefore we're ready to go for 2016. I think your comments in relation to the length of time it's taken to pass the bill, I think it's valid on one level. This is a bill that has been hanging around, for want of a better word, since 2012. But since I became Minister in July, I think it's also fair to say that we have taken the bill as quickly as we could, but we've also provided time and space and lengthy debate and interaction with stakeholders, which caused, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it did cause a delay in the passage of the legislation. Now, is the legislation we have passed better than it was at the start? As a result, it is. I take your point that it did take a long time to get it through both houses, but a lot of these issues, including in relation to commercial issues in sports clubs, have been hanging around for a long time too, and I think we have provided clarity. I'm informed by the Commissioner of Valuation that he will now initiate a process of updating the valuation list for community sports clubs and not-for-profit childcare facilities that benefit from the amendment to this bill in Schedule 4, and therefore we will be ready to go with that.
Again, that's very important. Can I be assured that is only going to take place in the clubs that have bars, that we're not going to go now snooping and looking for, oh, they might be doing this or they might be doing that?
No, I mean, we're not.
And that would benefit those clubs that have bars. Sorry.
Yes, I mean, we're not in the business here of trying to take on an extra body of work. We have a massive amount of work to get through. The purpose of passing this bill is to get through it as expeditiously as possible. We're in the business of trying to see what relief can be afforded to clubs that have been paying rates, that may no longer have to pay rates on the entire entity that they had to pay rates.
Bar area.
The bar and the commercial.
Yeah, I will.
In the bill.
Just in a final point, I will say though that it is extremely disappointing that this is not in place yet. That these clubs now, you're saying, Minister, are the bills that they've received for 2015 now are due and payable. That is really disappointing because over a year ago we had Fine Gael backbenchers announcing that this had basically come into effect, and you're saying it won't come into effect next year. We put forward a bill. I think that was late 2013, maybe early 2014. This is an issue that has not been prioritised, and it is just really, really hard. And these clubs, my heart goes out to them because they're genuinely trying to do their best for the local community. These bars are not places where you just walk down for a pint. In many cases, they only open for club events or that members can gather, and yet they have the huge rates bill. And now they find that you're saying this bill now, they must pay this bill this year, and this will come as a huge disappointment.
I always try, Senator Byrne, when I sit in this seat, not to be in any way partisan during the passage of legislation, but you're provoking me at this stage. And I would just make the point that my party, when we were in opposition in the other House, was proposing amendments that would have provided relief to these sports clubs along the lines that we're now providing quite a number of years ago. It was rejected by the previous government. We have worked together, and I'm happy to acknowledge that, and I'm happy to acknowledge that you played a very constructive role in that too, in improving the legislation. We now have arrived at a point. I want to see it introduced as quickly as possible. The Commissioner has to carry out a body of work. That'll be done, and we'll be ready to go from 2016.
Just finally, I will make one further point. We had in the previous legislation a full exemption for sporting activities. Now you have watered that down, Minister, and in what I consider probably balanced, but I'm really depending on the Valuation Office not to go looking where they really have no business. Because these are not commercial entities, these are clubs, and if they're going to start looking around for technicalities or nitpicking, it will cause huge anger. I think that's very, very wrong. We want to see these bars, the maps of these clubs with the bars, redrawn so that they can have a lower rates bill as soon as possible.
And I don't think, Senator, we differ on this, and I've given you my assurance and the assurance that I've been given from the Valuation Office. And, you know, I don't believe we have watered down the provision. We won't have that debate again. I believe we have arrived at a place where we have an effective provision in place, a piece of legislation that will make an improvement for these sports clubs. And if you see any evidence to the contrary, that's an issue I'd be happy to explore with you, but I don't expect that you will.